This episode is all about hope, inspiration, and true possibilities. A great story of social well being. Yes, it's all about our seven sisters, the northeast of India. Welcome to Vitamin B with Mohana. This is where we help you take control of your well being. My guest today is the retired Colonel Christopher Rego, who leads and heads the Sunbird Trust. His efforts over the last so many years has ensured multiple schools being opened to ensure that little children have the opportunity to get into the mainstream and get educated and ultimately transform the situation in the northeast of India. The cultural or socio-political reasons why northeast of India has faced insurgency itself.
And if you go to the northeast, where there are more than 200 tribes, they don't have electricity, they don't have connectivity regular. Okay, no policeman or postman, nearest doctor could be 40, 50 kilometers away. And suddenly we sort of incorporate them into the Union of India and we expect that everything will be okay. And if you go to the remote parts of the northeast, people would not know what Hindi is or Hindu is or who is Sachin Tendulkar or what is a samosa.
The level of knowledge, the level of interaction with people from the northeast is so low.
90% of the northeast does not eat noodles, they wouldn't know what noodles is.
How do tribes resolve and communicate with one another through this conflict?
So it's not one size fits all for the entire northeast. Now you come to civil society, which I sometimes feel is very uncivil. So I think those are the best decisions taken in my life to go to both Mizoram and Manipur. If you talk of wealth in many parts of India, it is gold, it is a concrete house, it is a TV and a big car and whatever.
A common person, particularly in the conflict affected area, what were their challenges?
They live on a day-to-day basis, so that is the wealth of the people there.
So what kind of challenges does an army person go through? What do they do about it?
Now we have some schools on the China border with Arunachal.
Can you explain and share with us the situation on education in the northeast of India?
A school is constructed where the children are expected to come down the hill, cross the river. So from 5 children there to 10,000 children, I think the idea has worked.
One of the beautiful things about education and literacy is that it changes a generation, right?
Places where the children could cook. And I found more than 100 children from ages of 5 years upwards cooking by themselves. It was a shock to me. I said, why? And they're serving in some of the remotest places, like I said, without connectivity or electricity.
What happened to, the schools? What happened to the children who actually wanted to go and study?
Of the Northeast, we foolishly say they are Northeasterners, whereas they've got their own identities. It's like saying a Punjabi and a Tamilian are the same.
What do the Northeast people want? What are their expectations from India?
Like I said, the cultural identity of the Northeast. Okay, why is it not in our textbooks? Why did you and me only learn about the British and the Mughals? Why don't we celebrate their festivals? Why is it only Diwali and Dasara? Why not Bihu, which is a big festival of Assam? But people are dying because of this and still no action is being taken.
So come join me as I explore with him the history, the geography, the problems, the challenges, and yes, the wonderful possibilities of transforming the situation in the Northeast, which is such a beautiful part of our country. So join me, sit back, relax, and I'll see you at Vitamin B with Mohana. Hi Chris, welcome to Vitamin B, and it's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Mohana. Pleasure.
Chris, we've been talking, we've been trying to get to know each other, and such deep and meaningful work that you and Sunbird Trust have been doing. And with the podcast that we have started, mostly we are looking at the space of well-being itself. And one of the compelling part was to bring out inspiring stories which are around social well-being as well, because it's very easy to talk about. There's so much content out there to talk about fitness and emotional health, etc. But social well-being takes a long time, right? So it's very inspiring, and I really am humbled, and it's wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful, great. So Chris, I think we're going to have an exciting, deep, fairly hard-hitting conversation. That's what I'm looking at,
Look forward.
foreseeing in this probably an hour's conversation, right?
Yes, yes.
So just for our audience's understanding, let's start right at the beginning. We'll get into the northeast of India, right, and the context there. What has been the economic, the cultural or socio-political reasons why northeast of India has faced insurgency itself?
Yes. So we have to understand that before independence and before India was formed as a nation, there were a whole lot of principalities, the kingdoms, the Maharajas, and things like that. It was in India like, a few hundred of them. And if you go to the northeast, where there are more than 200 tribes and sub tribes on top of that, the diversity is even more. So these were people who were not used to being ruled by anybody else. Let me start with the Nagas, for instance. Now, if I ask you or anybody in the audience for that matter, what language do the Nagas speak? So somebody would probably say, oh, well, they speak Naga. Well, there is no such language as Naga because Nagas have so many different tribes. Within Nagaland, there are 16 recognized tribes and many, many sub-tribes, each of which have their own language. So now, these people, they have their own identities, their own aspirations. They fight for land and resources and things like this. And suddenly we sort of incorporate them into the Union of India and we expect that everything will be okay. I'd like to give the example of America, for instance. It's been now, almost 250 years since America got independence.
Yeah.
And America has still not got together. You still have the whites, you still have whites and blacks and racism and a whole lot of issues like that.
Yeah.
So our Northeast after independence is uniting, is integrating, but it is work in progress.
Sure.
Okay. So let me tell you the reasons why it has taken so long. Firstly, like I said, the identity issue. People are very fiercely protective of their identity and where they came from, their roots. And they want to protect that identity from the neighbors, the way of life, the land and resources. In the context of the past 100, 200 years, there have been migrations due to conflict and whatever that has caused even more upheaval. Then there's the emotional aspect of the people of the Northeast.
Sure.
Most of them feel akin to the Southeast Asia as opposed to Central India. So even visually, they would appear different. And if you go to the remote parts of the Northeast, people would not know what Hindi is or Hindu is or who's Sachin Tendulkar or what is a samosa.
Okay.
There's such a vast, and let's face it, there are still areas in the very remote parts of the Northeast where they don't have connectivity or electricity. For I'm talking even the border areas of Arunachal. I don't blame the government for that because it takes time for all these things to happen. Now, these people don't have an idea of people from the outside.
Sure.
And if you come to such places, which is across the Northeast, these very, very remote areas, they don't have electricity, they don't have connectivity regular. Okay, no policeman or postman, nearest doctor could be, 40, 50 kilometers away. And we want to sort of plant a flag and say Bharat Mata, which is something very strange to them. So, like I said, it's work in progress.
Yeah.
They need to be reached from that perspective. So the issues are identity. The issues are perceived lack of development, which is there. It has taken a long time for development and it's still happening. It's happening, but it's taking its time. There is health in terms of the lack of health facilities. You talk about migration, which is happening, which is causing problems. So they feel a bit marginalized in some parts of the Northeast. Again, I would stress that we should never make the mistake of saying that the whole Northeast is underdeveloped and the whole Northeast is conflict affected. So I'd make that correction in case anybody thinks that way. And so these are the issues that are emotionally in the minds of the people of the Northeast.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Chris. And, in all honesty, as we were growing up, and I know a number of people, particularly in cities, and having lived outside of Bangalore as well, where it's my home, the level of knowledge, the level of interaction with people from the Northeast is so low. And it's very easy for someone like me or many people who are listening to us today to have an assumption that a conflict is spread across a certain zone. So it's really valuable in terms of just understanding what you're sharing with us as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the common prejudices which people have of the Northeast, let's say all of them eat noodles.
Yeah.
Okay. 90% of the Northeast does not eat noodles. They wouldn't know what noodles is. Noodles is eaten mainly in the belt abutting, Tibet and that area where you have the Tibetan tribes. They have that. But if you come down to Mizoram or to Manipur or Nagaland, they wouldn't know what noodles is.
Okay, sure.
There's a perception that Northeast guys are damn good in kung fu and all that. So whereas it's not the way everywhere. There's a perception. I'm sad to say that the older generation, the villain in all the movies was whom?
Yeah, Danny.
Danny.
Yeah.
So Danny was the villain.
Yeah.
So anybody with slanted eyes, you had that fear, that kind of thing. Just come into common people because they've seen so much of it. So a lot of prejudices about people of the Northeast. And very importantly, it's as if the Northeast is just one group of people. So I come to the diversity again. I mentioned about Nagaland having 16 different tribes. Well, you come to Manipur, where all the conflict is going on just now. I don't know how many people would know that in a population of less than 3 million people, which is about maybe half or a third of Bangalore, which is the population of Manipur, there are 34 different identities.
Wow.
People have only heard Meitei and Kuki.
Right.
The Kukis themselves have so many subsections. The Meiteis have subsections. You have the Mizos, the Nagas, a whole lot of tribes, and all vying for identity, land, resources, their place in the sun. So that is what the nation needs to understand about the diversity of people, the diversity of aspirations. So it's not one size fits all for the entire Northeast. And you're only talking about Manipur. Imagine Arunachal, which is even more diverse. So many states, 8 states if you count Sikkim. So this is the issue of diversity which the nation needs to understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I was going to ask this later, but since you touched upon it, maybe I can ask you now. Given that there are so many numerous tribes, right, in each of these states, and the fact that some of them have conflict, they are conflict affected areas. How do tribes resolve and communicate with one another through this conflict, and what's their conflict resolution method?
Modernization, education have come in. People have got to now travel across each other's. They can't stay locked in their own landlocked little places. For necessity to live, to work, for their livelihoods, they have to travel. So with that, a lot of understanding of the neighboring people, their culture, their aspirations has come. So structures are developed where the village authorities themselves or the communities or the tribes have learned to have a dialogue with the neighboring communities. And very often it's the religious who play a big role in this, because they have people in both sides of, if you talk about the Baptists in Nagaland, so they would have members in this tribe as well as this tribe. So they would get people to have a dialogue.
A dialogue, okay.
And then also to resolve, there are government mechanisms. The administration has to definitely play a role in bringing people together, whether it be the DC or the SDOs and whatever.
Sure.
They have to keep an eye on things. And then you talk about the army and the Assam Rifles. So now they are the ones who I feel very, very important, because they are in areas where even the civil administration is shaky due to the violence and whatever. So they facilitate a lot of dialogue between the different people. Now you come to civil society, which I sometimes feel is very uncivil. The reason being is civil society I'm talking in the context of the Northeast, because a lot of the civil society of which Sunbird is a part is divided along ethnic lines.
Right.
So it is strongly, the orientation is more for the welfare of that group of people or that tribe as opposed to a humanistic approach. That being said, there are still NGOs which play a major role in conflict resolution.
Okay.
And of course, there is the legal thing of, they have structures in the villages which has been there for centuries, where they have these dialogues and meetings, and those conflicts are resolved at that
the ground level itself.
At the ground level. And now in the modern days, you have social media, you have other ways of communicating. You have children going to college where they're sitting on the same bench, people from different, so the interaction, they're working together, they're getting jobs together. So many mechanisms have opened up for which people can communicate with each other.
And understand each other.
And understand the reality of each other. That's true.
Yeah, that's unreal. So Chris, I just want to spend some time, about your life in the Northeast. You've been, a part of the Army, Indian Army.
Yes.
In uniform, you spent about 8 years, specifically in Mizoram as well as Manipur.
Yes.
Right. And since then, in 2016, you retired from the Army.
Sure.
And you've been associated and working in these areas. And you continue to be very closely associated through your trust as well, right?
Yes.
So how was life for you and your family there through all the context that you've been sharing with us?
Yes. So for the first thing, I'd like to say that I asked to be posted to the Northeast on both occasions for very selfish reasons. And those reasons are my love for culture, this type of diversity, the people. It had some sort of a mystery for me. I happen to be a crazy nature lover. That's the second part. And a sense of adventure. I wanted to be out of the mainland and go to a different part of the country. There was so much of, it was actually a pull to take us there. And I'm so glad that I listened to that. And when I asked to go to Mizoram and Manipur, my last posting to Manipur, in fact, they'd given me a Bangalore posting. And then because they allow you to settle down, Bangalore is my hometown.
Sure.
So instead I said, could you please post me to Manipur? And the young officer called me from the Army headquarters and said, sir, would you like to go to Manipur or Manipal? Because he thought I made a mistake because Manipal is just next door. So I said, no, I'd like to go to Manipur. He said, sir, are you feeling quite okay today? And you want to go to Manipur? So they said, before this mad colonel changes his mind, they got my posting issued to Manipur.
Sure.
So I think those are the best decisions taken in my life to go to both Mizoram and Manipur. From the start, I think what was the difference was that we are not going to sit confined in our military campus, where we are totally insulated from the local people and their lives. So my wife and I and our children took the decision that we're going to get out of the camp, go into the villages, meet the people, taste their food, even go to their churches or whatever, And that was a wondrous experience because so much of the baggage of the prejudices that we had got cleared immediately. And we really got to love the people. Now, for instance, we talk of wealth. If you talk of wealth in many parts of India, it is gold, it is a concrete house, it is a TV and a big car and whatever. If you come to some of the tribal areas, the wealth is that, firstly, they don't have a need for any of these things. They simply have a hut, where everybody comes after the day's work. They all sit around the fire. They may not even have a stool or a bed. But, they have no need to gather money all their lives for that gold or that house or whatever. They live on a day-to-day basis. So that is the wealth of the people there. So what did we take from our thing of the Northeast was, firstly, a greater understanding of the people, their lives, the rhythm of their lives, their realities, which is very different from what comes out in the press and whatever. We really enjoyed nature, whether it be Arunachal, the mountains over there, or we talk about the rice paddies in Manipur or the lakes, or, that is something that we really enjoyed every single day. And if a person coming from Bangalore like me, going to a place like that, it's therapy, absolute therapy. I happen to be a musician, as you would know. So I use that to the fullest effect. Even in the strangest village where people were, wondering who these guys, they used to call us Indians in some of the villages.
Oh, wow.
So that's still the thing because that's what they perceived us to be. But the minute I had the guitar out and I was playing with the boys, everything went away. And yes, you got to have a bit of adventurism also. So my wife and I got into the Northeastern food, especially in Mizoram, where in every place that we visited, we sort of picked up what are the types of things that they eat from the forest. We took pictures of those. We got those recipes, we tried them out, and we in fact wrote the recipes of Mizoram, which has been published.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So at the end of it all, I think we were very much enriched by spending that time over there.
So, given the number of years you've been there and your family has been associated, a common person, particularly in the conflict affected area, what were their challenges and what continues to be their challenges? How do they cope with it, Chris?
Yes. So again, I come to the point that we should not ever make the mistake that the whole of the Northeast is conflict affected. Things have been getting better in the past few years. Unfortunately, it has flared up in Manipur, and I hope that some sense will prevail on all sides and the situation will improve. So let's talk about the people in the conflict area. So
Yeah.
these few areas that are conflict affected.
And before we get into that,
Yes.
what's the estimated population that's actually getting impacted through the insurgency?
So, well, primarily, let me talk about the population of the three states which have been affected. Mizoram, which was affected by an insurgency from around 1966 to 1986, has a population for a little over 1 million or thereabouts.
Sure.
Okay, but Mizoram signed the peace accord in 1986 and has still come a long way. Has come a long way. I don't think a shot has been fired in anger since then, but the suspicions and the thing of the outsiders and whatever still remains. Then you come to Manipur, which, as per the 2011 census, had a population, I think, of about 28 lakh.
Okay.
So now it's 3 million. You could little 3 million or thereabouts. And then you come to Nagaland, which has a population of about 19 lakh or say 2 million people.
Sure.
So these are primarily the three states which are affected by the insurgency. You have the Ulfa in Assam, which is again seems to be a dying moment.
Yeah.
So you cannot say how many people it's impacting or affecting. And you have smaller insurgencies even in Meghalaya and Tripura and whatever, very tiny little things. So that's the population that's by and large been affected by the thing.
Yeah, sure.
Now you asked about the challenges that are faced by the local people. So one is that the sense of insecurity. And then moving from one tribal area, you see every 40, 50 kilometers is a new tribe. So if they're getting along, it's fine. But sometimes it's this apprehension that we're going through a different area.
Okay.
So even the schooling sometimes gets restricted because of language also. These are all things which people cannot help.
So every tribe speaks a different language, possibly?
Yes. So that is the thing. Things are getting a little bit stabilized now. For instance, in Manipur, people are realizing that so English and Manipuri are being spoken in most of the schools, and so is Hindi also coming in a certain way. Hindi not too much in Manipur, but English definitely, and Manipuri. That's how tribes are able to communicate with each other. So the younger generation are able to communicate through these languages, and the children in Manipur are all learning the Manipuri language, so that that's the language of the majority.
Sure.
If you come to Arunachal Pradesh, where there are supposedly more than 150, 200 tribes, Hindi has become the joining factor. So everybody knows Hindi. So people communicate like that. So one challenge is security. Language is sometimes an issue. Education has been hammered in terms of the government recruits teachers from whichever community, and they're posted in a certain place where there's a completely different culture, religion. They may be in the communities that are even fighting with each other.
Yeah.
So that person would never like to go there.
Right.
So we do have the issue of proxy teachers, where this person stays put where he is and pays for a proxy teacher over there. So that's another issue. So due to that, large number of schools in the conflict-affected areas are not functioning, barely functioning, with proxy teachers. With the fact is that people cannot come. The administrators cannot come due to the conflict and the threat to them. That is another issue. And again, another issue is when these conflicts flare off, there are blockades. People don't allow goods and resources to come. Medical facilities are limited because of this issue of different tribe, different community. So people do have a very tough time. But decades of this has made them a lot more resilient. They've come to develop solutions on how to circumvent these or solve these issues. It will take some time. Like I mentioned, that it's work in process. And I think with the help of the central governments and the state governments and the civil society, things will slowly get better.
Okay. And we'll talk more about that as a little later. In these conflict-affected areas, the role of the army becomes very important as well. And you were in the army yourself for a long time. It's always the situation where people in uniform have to confront insurgents. At the same time, they have to be supportive towards the people and the communities and the tribes that they actually live amidst. So what kind of challenges does an army person go through? What do they do about it on a daily basis then?
So army people have definitely many challenges that they face when they're posted in the Northeast. Let's talk about the remoteness and the ruggedness. Now we have some schools on the China border with Arunachal, and we know what it means. There are constant landslides. electricity and connectivity have not reached many of these places. And it gets freezing cold in the winter. And our soldiers and our troops are expected to be fully functional over there. There is loneliness, they miss their families. A lot of facilities coming from the army to make things better. That's one of the challenges. If you come to the conflict affected areas, you see, the army people always wear their uniform.
Yeah.
Whereas the civil guys, they can mix among the community. And it's, people dare not speak against the militants from their own group. So, mixed in a group of common people, somebody will toss a grenade or open fire on our soldiers. So, that apprehension on the soldiers when they're going out patrolling or they're working there, it takes a tremendous emotional sort of cost on their emotional state of mind.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of over a period of time, soldiers do need to be counseled or given a break, that kind of a thing. And then the insurgency is not united that it is only here.
Yeah.
There are so many different types of insurgencies.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone requires a different way of handling these insurgencies to make a connect with those communities and find out what are their issues, right? Now, the biggest challenge for a soldier, and I was one, is that the nation has given you a mandate to do something to control the insurgency. You cannot be, have empathy and compassion when you're facing bullets and you're dealing with people who are killing other people. So a soldier's job is to carry the gun and carry it properly, because that is what the nation has trusted him to do. At the same time, he has to be so wary of not having so much collateral damage that it has the opposite effect of the people rising up against the nation. So in the army, people are, I'll be very frank in saying that when I was a young officer, which was in the 1980s, we didn't have so much of training in human rights and whatever. Now I can say with confidence, the issues of, any brutality by the army or the Assam Rifles,
it comes out, right? Yeah.
It's come down tremendously. It's almost non-existent. And I'll give you a beautiful example. Now, for instance, if a soldier from a camp went out and molested a woman outside, he would be punished in days or weeks and really given a very stiff punishment. But the bigger thing is that his boss would also get a red mark in his dossier for not having that leadership to ensure that such a thing did not happen. So this is the level of accountability that's come into the army. There's a huge degree of training in human rights and things like this, whereas soldiers have become aware that even under terrible provocation, what they can do and what they cannot do. And things are only getting better. Yes. So now the soldiers, the army and the Assam Rifles and the paramilitary forces like the BSF and the CRPF, they've got this job of winning back the trust of the people, making them believe that they are there for their purpose, for their protection, so that they can live normal lives. And we have this beautiful concept of WHAM, WHAM.
Okay.
So it's not bashing people, it is winning hearts and minds.
That the army follows.
Yes. So the army has a policy of winning hearts and minds.
Okay.
So while these insurgency operations and all are going on, they are doing wondrous things in the border areas, like solar building
roads also, right?
Even helping out. They don't do it themselves, but they facilitate these things. So it's a dual. That's the difficulty which the army people face tremendously.
Unbelievable. And they get rotated out every few years, Chris?
Yes. They do get rotated out. And the Assam Rifles, a little less in the sense that they keep on going within that area. They do get rotated out. Get an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that just gives us a picture of what an army person's personal experience in the region was. The common man's struggle in conflict-driven areas, as well as the entire army, Indian army, what they really do and contribute, and the challenges they face. Thanks for sharing that as well. I want to come closer to the work you're doing now. Can you explain and share with us the situation on education in the northeast of India?
So the whole existence of Sunbird is peace through education. What we realized, my wife and I, when we were in Mizoram and we traveled the length and breadth, I was the engineer officer and I had to go to all the posts right up to the Myanmar border, and we had to really travel extensively. And everywhere we made it a point to stop by and have a cup of tea or even a meal with the locals. We made it a point that our driver and a person who was helping us were local people so that we could communicate easily. And when we came to know the reality of the people, we found that this suspicion of outsiders, the baggage from the insurgency and whatever, what was happening is that an entire generation of youth were not getting a chance to get into school.
Yeah.
And two reasons. In the tribal areas, especially, every hillock, where the villages are, would have, say, 50, 70, 100 huts. And a distance away, another 10, 12 kilometers, you'll have something else like that. So you can't have schools everywhere. So a school is constructed where the children are expected to come down the hill, cross the river, pick the leeches off from their feet, and get to school. Sometimes a walk of 1 to 2 hours one way.
God. Okay.
So this is the reality of things. So the accessibility of the schools is one. The secondly is, do the schools exist? Thanks to them being in very remote areas and the people who are supposed to maintain them. And let's be very frank, across Northeast, there's a level of corruption as well,
Sure.
where the schools are barely functional or even non-functional, a big issue. Then we come to the other aspect in education, where even if the schools exist and say there are people running schools, the children do not have the financial ability to come there. So without that, they are not able to sort of finish their education.
Sure.
Then I'll give you another aspect which people may not understand, is that in these small villages, you have schools, say, up to 3rd standard or up to 5th standard.
Okay.
Then the children have to move far away to another place and take from maybe 5th to 7th or 5th to 10th.
Okay.
And when they move, two things happen. Sometimes they're so poor that they cannot afford even the change of uniform.
Okay.
And secondly, they have to stay in a hostel. And hostels are prohibitively expensive. Okay, so third thing with that, if the children are small and they have to go to a faraway place, supposing there's no school nearby, one of the parents has to go with the child and stay in that place to look after that child, to see that that child gets an education. So what does that mean? It means you've lost one income back home.
Yeah.
They were barely surviving because both parents were working.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the issues. I mentioned to you that there is a level of corruption in the whole system. I don't blame only corruption. It's a systemic failure in many places because of language, of culture. There has to be a system which recognizes that if you want somebody to teach in that place, that person has to know the local language, the culture, and whatever.
Right.
You can't post a person from a totally different background and say, go and teach in that school which is 200 miles away, where this person doesn't know about security or safety.
And this is still happening as
This is still happening.
Yeah.
So again, I'd be very cautious to say that things are improving.
Yeah.
But let's not hide this fact that these type of things are thing. So these are some of the big issues. So the children cannot progress because of this aspect.
Yeah. And Chris, that becomes so important to sort of link it to what you're doing, right? You were in the army. Things were going, I'm sure, as per your expectations. You were an engineer in the army. What was that moment of realization or epiphany, if I can use it, to actually make this huge change in your life? Or maybe it's not a huge change, it came more naturally to you, but why Sunbird Trust, and why did you make that transition at all?
So it takes me back to Mizoram when my wife and I were there.
Yeah.
I explained to you how we found that education, because of the youth not getting education, they turned to radicalization, or they had to go across to Myanmar and smuggle in things to make a living, purely to survive. I won't say the intent was to radicalize or whatever. So it was a survival mechanism. And so the whole cycle of violence, which had been there for decades, was carrying on and on, thanks to children not being able to access school.
Yeah.
So that's where my wife and I decided to be the difference. And starting in Mizoram, we started with 5 children, where we sponsored them from our own funds. I was just a junior army officer at that time. So a number of things happened. First and foremost, we noticed that when we sponsored the child, the parents immediately became friendly. It was not a question of getting to them and trying to impress them or whatever. It was immediately that they became friendly and sort of all barriers went away. That was the first thing.
Sure.
The second thing is that these children who got this access to education, they grabbed it, they and the parents, and they did very, very well. Let me fast forward to say that one of the most highly qualified doctors in Mizoram was one of our first children who we supported. Right? Then we came across the idea that, hey, listen, they are becoming so friendly just by us touching them like this. What would it be like if we got people from the rest of India to come and sponsor children here, whereby two things would happen. First and foremost, they would be empowered, they would get employability, they would pull their entire families out of poverty, they would educate the younger siblings, part one.
Yeah.
And part two, you'll build a sort of more trust between the people there and the people of the rest of India.
Right.
So these are the ideas that came. So now we put it into action by sponsoring the first few kids. And to our surprise, one of them is now in America. This kid, within a year, was able to, he was studying plus working in the cafeteria and whatnot. And a year later, when I informed him that I'm moving to another part of, I was posted to Bangalore at that time.
Yeah.
He said, "Sir, just hang on, my parents will come and meet you."
Okay.
Now his parents came literally from a hut with no address in Aizawl, the capital of Mizoram. And they came with a pumpkin, a shawl, and a small packet.
Okay.
And I had a translator to speak to them also. And they said, "Thank you so much for helping our son, and now he's now earning and doing well and all that." So they gave us this pumpkin and the shawl and this packet. "What is this?" "No, it's the money." He said he doesn't, he's made up the money and he feels very bad to keep it with him. So he sent the money back.
Oh my God, okay.
All right. So it was a shock to us. Then we said, my gosh, if this is the case, what are we doing, keeping our money in the bank and getting 5 and 6% interest when we could do this and change lives?
Yes.
Now, this boy called me from there and he said, "Sir, you've made a profound difference," because I'd given him a substantial loan to go to America. And I'd only told him that, "Please return it when you can." So this is what happened. So he called me and said, "Sir, my best friend is in Aizawl and he's doing a MCA course, computer course in Bangalore. And he's unable to give the exam and unable to get his books because he does not have the money. Would you consider rolling the money over to him? But it's a little more." So I said, "Okay, let's try." So we put together the money. And then what happened was this boy got a job and 8 months later gave the money back.
Okay.
So this, you could say, was the moment of epiphany, the thing that...
it can actually work.
Right? It can actually work and be sustainable as well. So from 5 children there to 10,000 children, I think the idea has worked.
That's incredible, Chris. And it also tells you that it can be done, and it can be done in a very sustainable way. One of the beautiful things about education and literacy is that it changes a generation, right? You really move forward so dramatically. And we've seen so many cases, even in Bangalore. You see street vendors' children coming into like offices with just doing call center jobs. But the fact is, an entire generation has shifted. And they enter the middle class, and it's a very different social strata they enter as well, right? So that's great. And so tell us, Chris, a little more about Sunbird Trust, and why do you think peace is going to be achieved through education? Why do you think that's the approach that will work there?
Yes. So that was the concept which I just told you that my wife and I discovered. That education is a key. If we can get the younger generation access to education physically by building them schools and hostels, and financially by sponsoring them, and getting people from the rest of the country to come and join this process, it's going to be something really magnificent in terms of a change. And the second thing is, it's not just education and sending children to school. The concept is a many-layered concept of peace through education. For instance, now our thing is not just at the children. Once we sort of engage with the children, we will go to their communities. Through the children, we get into their parents, their villages. It spreads to the neighboring villages, and people get to know us. We sort of get them used to people from the outside. Otherwise, it's a very insular thing of the tribe. So now all my 40 young team members, most of them, are from 14 different states across India. There are 5 or 6 different religions, languages, whatever. So all of them are embedded in these villages, and they bring a huge amount of learning and openness to the village. It's both ways, actually. I wouldn't be so think to say that only the village people are learning, that kind of thing. So the concept of peace through education, and then the other thing was that there is a mindset against India and Indians, in many of the places. Rightly or wrongly, it's not that people decided to do it. It's for a whole lot of reasons, like I mentioned, the cultural reasons, the reasons of identity, the reasons of development, and whatever. Okay. So through our schools, we wanted to bring the rest of the country to sort of engage with the people of the Northeast. Why should people or children in Bombay or Pune have beautiful schools and hostels?
And why not in the Northeast, right?
So the key word is equity. educational equity. Okay, so that's something that we wanted to bring.
Sure.
So Sunbird, our concept is peace through education, because we feel that through education, the children get employability, they get empowered, they pull their entire families out of poverty. Like I said, through this process, we bring people together. Now we come to the concept of all our schools being friendship schools.
Yeah, I love that, Chris.
Yeah. So Sunbird has built, as of now, 13 schools. Every school has a local name which the local community chooses. It's in their language. The second name is friendship, and the third is school. So all our schools are called friendship schools. And on top of that, we have this unique thing of a friendship curriculum.
Yes.
Okay, which we are trying to bring into all our schools, which give the children exposure to plurality, to diversity, to different religions, and to give them not just a tolerance, but a sort of welcoming of diversity, that kind of thing.
Is it being done because there's lack of understanding, lack of knowledge of one another as well?
Absolutely. Now in the digital age, it's slowly getting better with connectivity and whatever, that people are able to see videos and see that their world is not just the village or the tribe, which was very much there in the older generation who didn't have electricity. There's no way that they would know of anything outside their village.
Sure.
So that's slowly, like I said, work in progress.
Yeah.
The tribal feelings and the community feelings, whether it be tribal or whether it be even the other communities which are more towards the towns and cities, is very strongly still inward looking, and that's something that is slowly changing and getting better. And it's changing by those people coming to Bangalore and working in the BPOs. You have people of different tribes, communities all together. Now they don't have that thing of my tribe, so they sort of get to understand.
Assimilating in a broader social thing.
Yeah.
So, Chris, so many years that you've been doing this, right, through the trust. Particularly again, I want to just go back and focus on the 3-4 states that you mentioned, right? And most of your work, by the way, is also in Manipur, if I'm, I've understood correctly. Yes. So, what were the challenges for you to start and sustain this? Were people open to actually doing this? I'm sure the common person would have been okay, but what kind of challenges did you face?
So the real work, when I was posted to Manipur, I was very fortunate to be posted with the Border Roads organization, by virtue of which I had to travel the length and breadth of Manipur on work, right? Had I been in the army with the insurgency and the conflict and whatever, I felt I would have been confined to the golden cage of the camp without having the freedom to move. So by the time I reached Manipur, which was in 2012, some of the village people in a particular area had heard about our work in Mizoram. And they said, "Sir, you have done that there, why can't you come to our village and do this?" Now, the problem was, where they had asked me to come was a very deeply conflict-affected place, where people had been killed, locals as well as army people. It was a live insurgency conflict area, whichever way you want to see it. And here was a colonel being invited to go into the village, and they said, "Sir, we desperately need you to come and see how you can help out with the school and the hostel and whatever." So now the army guy said, "Are you crazy? We are not going to take responsibility for you when you go over there." And I didn't have a shred of protection being in the Border Roads organization. But it was a leap of faith both ways. I said, if they've come, let me go. So went to that place. And that's the place when the first site that I saw where these little places where the children could cook. And I found more than 100 children from ages of 5 years upwards cooking by themselves. It was a shock to me. I said, why? So the thing came is that they come from villages which are far away. Neither the village nor the people running the school had the ability to have a hostel. So the kids to be there were given this opportunity to cook by themselves. So their parents would come and leave a sack of rice, come and chop some firewood, and come over the weekend or after 2 weeks. And the children were expected to pretty much manage by themselves. It was a forested, or you could say semi-forested area. So the kids were expected to go into the forest, get some mushrooms or get some leaves or roots, or go down to the river and get snails or little fish and cook by themselves. But when I opened those little pots, I found that at least 2-3 of the kids were having plain rice, just boiling rice and having it. So that was a profound impact on us. So I'll come back to, you said, what are the challenges being faced? So one aspect is the security issue. especially Manipur as it is now, is badly divided. There's also whether the people trust you.
Yeah.
Now, being an army person, the first thing is he coming as a spy?
Yeah.
Is he coming to report our young boys to the army guys?
Right.
So we had to overcome that hurdle.
Okay.
Right? So to build that trust was another huge challenge, which took a lot of time and resilience and perseverance.
Yeah.
Financial issues, we started from our own pockets. We had the big idea, but somebody gave us this big thing that, hey, have the passion and the means will follow.
And did that work?
It's worked like crazy.
Yeah.
Now, where would I imagine that from what we started with 4 or 5 children, we are now an organization which is across 6 states.
Right.
We have built 13 schools and 21 hostels, and we are sponsoring as many as 10,000 children now.
Amazing.
And we have our own vehicles, and most of all, I would never imagine having this beautiful team of 40 young professionals. And these are the most solid people who have given up either the corporate world, or they are masters in development or in education or in social work, and they're serving in some of the remotest places, like I said, without connectivity or electricity and things like that. So that's another challenge, that we have to draw that type of talent and youngsters with that type of commitment that they will be in a place like this. So there's a security issue, there is the financial issue for sure to sustain this. I get challenged sometimes by people from big NGOs saying about, what is your sustainability? That you're looking after the children in some of these remotest villages. How does the money come back, and how do you continue running your organization? So I explain it in a different way. I said, would you ask that to Mother Teresa? The dying and the dead, how does she steal money from them and keep her organization sustainable? So I said, my sustainability is a lot more long-term. It doesn't come immediately. When those kids come back, they get jobs and come back to their community. That is sustainability, when they're lifting their whole families. That is part one. The sustainability is when the peace is being built, where there was so much of division and sort of suspicion of the rest of the country, where huge areas have now sort of come back. That is another aspect. Where we've made it conducive for other NGOs to leverage our platform of trust and come and sort of do health or do environment or things like this. So that was another of the challenges.
I love the journey, and I love the whole white bullet concept. There are videos, just for our listeners, there are videos that they can also go and see. The white bullet means the chalk and not the bullet from the gun. And I thought that was really, really deep and very profound as well, and very apt, of course. One of the things, Chris, this last year, Manipur has just been in the news, right? And I understand you have your team there, probably who's going to watch this and listen, so we'll be quite sensitive about it. But having said that, how did this crisis that happened, that reached each of our homes, what happened to the schools? What happened to the children who actually wanted to go and study?
So this is an unfortunate thing that has happened, which was building up over the years, which I personally feel the steps should have been taken a long time ago to address. And I won't go into the politics or the rights and wrongs of it. I would go to say that both communities have genuine grievances, in terms of the land that they have, their livelihoods, their culture, their identity. So I'm not one to take sides, and I'm very proud to say that we have got respect and acceptance from all communities. We are one of the few NGOs that is able to work across, tribes, communities, because strictly Sunbird does not have any agenda of culture, politics, religion, and things like this. So that gives us a lot of acceptance. So coming back to the conflict in Manipur, why we feel it a lot is for us to bring that ounce of peace in areas which have seen conflict. We know the sacrifice of the team members, we know the emotional investment, the financial investment, the sort of resilience we've had to have, the patience we've had to have for years and years and years to bring that little bit of peace. And here in an instant, people are dead, everything has been rolled back 30, 40 years. That being said, I think our thing is that's none of our business. We do what we can, and the fruit of that is not in our hands. We will accept, but it's our job never to give up. So coming to the conflict, you're asking how do our team members manage? Yes, initially when the conflict broke out, we had to rescue team members. They had to be taken into the camps, and it was horrible in the camps. Suddenly, hundreds of people without even proper toilets and food and whatever.
Sure.
That's how we had to rescue our team members. But the minute a couple of team members left because their parents were not happy that they could be staying over there. That being said, one of the important things of Sunbird is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So you talk about COVID or you talk about this conflict that is there. This is the time that our work is actually expanded.
Okay.
So our team members are back on ground. We have made the adjustments of tribe, community, whatever. In a huge way, we are working not just in the education, but also in the relief for the displaced people on both sides of the divide.
And how the work that Indian government has been doing very actively, the central government has been really trying to speed up development in the northeastern states, right? How has that impacted the improvement of people's lives there?
Yes. So I'm happy to say that over the past, a decade or so, I can personally see it because I was there a decade ago. And I was there even before that. I mean, I've been traveling through that area. Like I said, I was in Mizoram from 2003 to 2006, that time. So it's a dramatic improvement that has happened. It is work in progress. Once again, I'll repeat that term. A lot of development has come in terms of the connectivity, in terms of the road connectivity. Many, many new roads have come, which has now people are able to market their produce and get it to the market and earn an income. That has helped tremendously. The railway lines are being expanded. Now, for the first time, a railway line is coming. It will soon reach Imphal in a little while. The Udan program of the government, every man can fly. Every person, why shouldn't every person fly? That has also reached the airports, and that connectivity is happening. A lot of schemes towards education from the government sides. Many, many schemes towards skill development. One thing you've got to understand in the Northeast is that the old societies, especially the tribal societies in the hills, were dependent upon the forests, right? They got everything they needed from there.
Sure.
Now, let me go first to the development, the positive things. Health has improved in terms of the primary health centers and whatever. When I say improved, there are still a lot of work to be done. There are schemes for afforestation, which is happening. So the environment is also being taken care of.
So development is it's a paradox, right? You have positive and not so great things happening.
Absolutely.
So can you help us understand this paradox? Is it eating into the traditional way of life in the northeastern states?
It is very much a paradox, and I think I would be one of the first people to have felt it and seen it. I'll give you a typical example. When I visited one of our children's home, when my wife and I were sponsoring children pre-Sunbird, I'm talking about 2012 or 2013, we went to this little village in the hills, and the lady said, wait, I'll make you a cup of tea, and I'll just go and get some firewood. So she rushed across the road and from the forest itself plucked some firewood. In no time, we had a cup of tea. Fast forward a decade, and I went to meet the same family because by now we had helped to educate 4 children from that family. And I asked her, what is the scene? She said, sir, the firewood comes from almost 20 kilometers away, and I have to pay for it now. Wow. Because the road that has come has led to the shaving of the hills. So on one hand, we are able to access the city, we are able to get the hospital and the airport and whatever we need to do. But this is what has happened. This is the paradox. It's a double-edged sword.
Sure.
So with development, better connectivity, especially mobile connectivity.
Right.
Now let's talk about the mobile connectivity and the internet.
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot of knowledge that's now on the fingertips of the kids,
Yes.
which their parents never ever had.
Right.
But it's also having the negative aspect of materialism.
Yes.
Okay, it's Korean pop culture and Japanese pop culture and getting those shoes, which is a whole year's thing of their parents, So those are some of the negative aspects of development is happening.
Yeah.
It's also impacting their traditional way of life. Now, for instance, if you talk about the Naga tribes or the Mizo tribes, even the tribes in Manipur, even people in the cities, the Maitais, with development, a lot of those old traditions are being thrown out of the window.
Yeah.
Now, for everything, the people used to weave these lovely baskets, even
Sure.
for marriages and whatever, they used to weave it. Now there's a plastic thing you can buy
It's
from the shop.
ready and okay.
Okay, so those traditions are being impacted.
Yeah.
So their culture, the traditions which have come down for centuries are being sort of impacted.
Lost. Eventually might be lost further.
Yeah, and be lost further. Some of the tribes of,
Yeah, I think as we come to the last part of today's conversation, what do the Northeast people want? What are their expectations from India?
so the people of the Northeast would like to see that they're getting the same attention that the rest of the country is getting. The trajectory of development in the Northeast is more than a decade or 2 decades behind the rest of India,
Sure.
as far as many things are concerned. So that is what people of the Northeast want to see, that they get that development, whether it be education, health, connectivity, whatever. That is one thing. They certainly want stable lives, okay, and not disturbed by conflict and insurgency and the threat and whatever. That's something else which is very close to their hearts. They have to have that. Third is this, what I call this equity in education. I think most people in the Northeast realize that that is the one thing that is going to empower them and change their lives completely. So that aspiration for having accessible education, both physically and financially, is a very big thing for the people of the Northeast. And I've explained to you the diversity of the people of the Northeast. We foolishly say they are Northeasterners, whereas they've got their own identities. It's like saying a Punjabi and a Tamilian are the same. That's that much diversity. So they would like that respect for their identity, their culture, to be recognized by the rest of the country, to recognize the uniqueness of what they are. Those are some of the things which are really the people of the Northeast would like.
And so that's one end of the spectrum, Chris. On the other end, what should Indian government do to integrate, the Northeast culturally into India a lot more?
To integrate the people of the Northeast, as I say, you need a lot of patience and you need a lot of far-sightedness. It's not quick fix measures where you just throw a little money and the thing is solved. You need to think way ahead in terms of bringing stability. Let's start with the security in terms of the physical security. So one thing that the government of India needs to do, and I think it's already on the job, is bringing that peace between the conflict-affected communities among each other. Because that has the propensity to spread, not just from those 2 or 3 communities and go beyond. So intervening to be seen as a fair arbiter, to get both sides, it's a difficult job, but it has to be, that bridge has to be crossed. Okay, so that is one of the things that the government has to do. The second is to control the corruption that is there. I make no mention of any particular party or government. It is all pervasive in many parts of the Northeast. I would like to say that everybody likes a good insurgency. Because when you have an insurgency, people cannot come and check. These are things that as a nation we need to be aware. We cannot gloss over these facts. This is not a political thing of this party or that party. Things are moving, but it needs to be a lot faster. What else can the government do is, like I said, the cultural identity of the Northeast. Okay, why is it not in our textbooks? Why did you and me only learn about the British and the Mughals? Why didn't we learn about the Ahom dynasty, which was from the 13th century to the 19th century, or the Maitai kings, which were even longer, from the 12th century till this current day, till 1949? Why don't we have a much better knowledge of our own people? So in terms of, why don't we celebrate their festivals? Why is it only Diwali and Dasara? Why not Bihu, which is a big festival of Assam? And even if we don't celebrate, aren't our children at least aware that this is the thing? So that is a major aspect where the whole system has to be changed so that the rest of the country is aware and gets out all these prejudices that Northeast is something different. It's all one thing. We are all different, and that's what we need to accept. It's not something separate.
And it's so true, Chris, because we started this conversation, by acknowledging, right, very little is known. And when there is a crisis, it causes so much confusion. You really don't know what the truth is. There's a lot of information. So it's actually good to have someone like you who's been on the ground, who's doing real grassroots leadership work there as well, right? So my last 1 or 2 questions for you is, when you look back, right, at everything that's happened, the courage that you've shown, what is the role of fear and what's the role of courage to drive social transformations of this kind?
Let me reel back. You used the wrong word. You said
Sure.
there's a lot of information. I would say there's a lot of disinformation.
Sure. Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
which is
Fair
causing
enough, yeah.
a lot of the problem.
Yeah.
No, of course you
Sure.
you intended in the
Yeah.
right way, but the amount of disinformation that is being spread by vested interests through
Sure.
social media and whatever is keeping people divided.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing where the government should say no, zero tolerance for these type of things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's too much of leeway for free speech.
Right.
People are dying because of this, and still no action is being taken. So I would be on the radical side to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
And the government, no matter which side you're from, has to enforce the rule of law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, coming to your question about courage versus fear. It's foolish to think that even a very brave army soldier never had fear.
Yeah.
Okay, so fear is extremely important because it builds up our a way to cope with it. Fear is a feeder to courage.
Yeah.
Okay, now for instance, if a cyclone is coming, everybody has fear.
Yeah.
But then they have they have to take steps to
Yeah.
mitigate that, and from that comes the courage of what comes next. So when fear is there, it builds up your resilience.
Yeah.
It builds up your coping mechanisms. It builds up your personality. It also gives you empathy with other people.
Sure.
Fear. And let me come to courage now. Courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is having the fear and having the ability to deal with it
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah.
So that is courage. No?
Yeah.
Talking about people who are just don't have any fear is foolhardiness. Okay? So and courage also is got many dimensions to itself. It's not just a physical courage, it's a mental courage, it's a moral courage within the armed forces. Okay? The physical courage is, of course, no matter what, face the bullet, do it sensibly,
Yeah.
that you don't endanger yourself or your colleagues and still get the mission achieved. So that is the physical courage. The mental courage is your ability, despite the worst of circumstances, and I'm talking as a person who is required to be a leader, right? That in the worst of situations, you're able to keep people going, keep them focused, be part of them, and show that you're facing the same situation, not sitting somewhere under a pankar while they are in the field.
Yeah.
You know, that type of courage is required. So in leadership, you require a lot of that. And I mentioned the moral courage. I'll give an example. Moral courage goes beyond your loyalty to a particular party or even an institution. I feel moral courage is about you being loyal to humanity. It's one rule for everyone. That is the path. It's not that show me the face and I'll show you what my loyalty is. And I'll give you an example that within the army also, despite the 99.99% of the good people, you do have black sheep who have done wrong things and brought us a bad name in the insurgency areas.
Sure.
It could be through human rights abuses. It could be things like that, you know, even corruption or whatever. The tiny percentage of the paramilitary forces and the army and I think that have done this type of thing. So moral courage comes when you're able to stand up in the uniform and say, hey, just a minute, that is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? And people shouldn't turn on you and say, how can you go against another person in the uniform? So no matter what you stand and say, this is right. And I stand for it. I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. So that is the other aspect of
Courage, right? That's wonderful.
So these two actually support each other.
Yeah.
You know, the fear builds up the courage. And the courage sort of helps you to act despite the fear and even get rid of the fear at times.
And ultimately, you get clarity, right? Once
get
you
clarity.
you have the courage, you know what you should be doing.
Yeah.
So that leads to a lot of clarity.
Yeah.
I can't leave, the audience without this one last question that I have for you. What does the Northeast of India mean to you personally?
So the Northeast is something very special.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I took the decision that I should go there. It has completely changed my life and the rest of my life. I would start by saying it has become a second home.
Yeah.
You may think that I'm exaggerating when I say that sometimes my wife and I do think that what if we settle over there in some part of the Northeast?
Yeah.
So it is something very special because we have not acted from sitting in Bangalore and telling things be done. We have lived over there. We have lived in those villages. And I do not know if you know that my wife and I we had at that stage 35. Now there are even more children in Bangalore who we had brought out from the tiniest villages, different parts of Manipur mainly, and some from Nagaland. And they have done their bachelor's and their master's in law, engineering, medicine, whatnot, a whole lot of things, social work, for instance. Now, all these students were with us from the 11th standard to their graduation, and some of them till their post graduation, and right here in Bangalore. So, the type of emotional connect we have with them, and when we go back to their villages, the entire village comes to meet us.
Sure.
So, that's home to us. And these children, some of them still call us mom and dad, some of them are working, they're big people in their own right. So there's that very deep emotional connect through the children.
Yeah.
And of course, it's an escape from the smoke and dust of Bangalore. And you have this, the beautiful, the fields and the hills and the mist and whatever. So I like to escape there pretty often.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I haven't been there, and I'm certainly, like we were talking, right? It'll be amazing to actually visit and learn a lot more. So Chris, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. And there's so much to learn. Every piece of information that you've shared has been just very, very, very valuable. And and the work that Sunbird Trust is doing, what you have done through your life, and your family dedicating to this is extremely inspiring. So thank you so much for coming here, and we look forward to at some point coming and working through your organization and taking a look at what Northeast really means by visiting it as well.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope that those who are watching will get a slightly different perspective from what they are seeing in the media and getting through the newspapers and the prejudices that come about people of the Northeast. So I hope in a small way that I've been able to sort of project the beauty of our Northeast.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mohana.
Thank you.